You've heard this line 1,000 times, probably today. It's on gym walls, it's tattooed on people, it's in photo captions, and very likely someone said it to you during one of the worst moments of your life, with the best of intentions, believing they were helping. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I need to tell you 3 things about that sentence, and each one will bother you more than the last. The first, it really is Nietzsche's. It isn't an internet invention. He wrote it in Twilight of the Idols in 1888. The second, almost everyone who repeats it is understanding it backwards. It isn't a promise, it's a condition. And the difference between those 2 things is the difference between a life that was built and a life wasted enduring what should never have been endured. And the third, which interests me most, Nietzsche wrote that line in 1888. In January of the following year, 1889, he collapsed on a street in Turin, suffered a breakdown he never recovered from, and spent the last 11 years of his life without ever writing another lucid line. In other words, the man who wrote that what didn't kill him made him stronger was, at that exact moment, being destroyed by what wasn't killing him. And that's precisely why this video matters. Because the most famous line in philosophy became a comfortable lie, and that lie has hurt a lot of people. Today I'm going to give you 7 brutal truths about suffering and about what it does and doesn't do to you. Stay until the end, because in the 7th, I'll hand you what Nietzsche actually meant, and it's far more useful and far harder than the t-shirt slogan you know. There's no lap here. There's a forge. Let's go. First truth. The line isn't a promise, it's a condition. Pay attention to the structure of the sentence, because the trap is right there. When someone says, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger," they're reading it as a law of nature. Every suffering you endure will automatically make you stronger. It's a promise. You endure, and the universe pays you in strength. But that isn't what the line says, and it isn't what happens. Just look around. Look at the people you know who went through terrible things. Did they all come out stronger? No. Many came out smaller, more fearful, more bitter, more distrustful. They started avoiding risks they used to take. They stopped trusting anyone. They began living with a wound that never closed. If the line were a law, that would be impossible. If suffering strengthened people, the places with the most suffering in the world would be the ones producing the strongest people. And that isn't what happens. So the line only makes sense one way, as a condition, not a guarantee. There is a kind of relationship with suffering that strengthens, and there are many others that only destroy. The line describes a possibility, not an automatic outcome. The first truth, then, suffering pays nothing on its own. It isn't an investment with a guaranteed return. Whoever sold you that sold you a comforting lie, and you bought it because it was easier than the truth. Second truth. Most suffering doesn't strengthen anyone. It just breaks them. Here I need to be more honest than most channels are, because this lie has already caused too much damage. Suffering, most of the time, merely damages. It consumes time, corrodes health, hardens a person in the wrong places, leaves marks that get in the way forever. The child who suffered abandonment doesn't become a stronger adult because of it. They become an adult who has to work hard, often with help, to undo what it did to them. And when someone says, What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, to a person in the middle of real pain. That person receives a cruel message embedded in the line. The message is, if you're not coming out of this stronger, the problem is you. You're doing it wrong. Others would have turned this pain into strength, and you failed. That's a violence, and there's nothing Nietzschean about it. Nietzsche despised dishonesty, and denying the reality of pain is one of the most cowardly forms of dishonesty. He never romanticized suffering as a good thing. He knew pain far too closely for that. He spent entire days vomiting, with migraines that blinded him, unable to read or write for weeks. The second truth, then, suffering is not a teacher. Suffering is raw material. On its own, it teaches nothing, and most of the time, it only destroys. Pretending otherwise disrespects everyone who was genuinely broken. Third truth. What strengthens isn't the suffering. It's what you do with it. Here's the distinction that changes everything, and it's the heart of this video. Think about a gym, since that's where the line most often hangs on the wall. What strengthens a muscle isn't the weight. It's what the body does afterward. The rebuilding of the fiber, the rest, the nutrition, the repetition over months. If you only lift the weight and do none of the rest, you don't get strong, you get injured. Suffering works the same way. It's the weight. It isn't the training. The training is what comes after, the reflection, the change in behavior, the thing you build out of it, the decision you make because of it. Without that, the weight only crushes. Nietzsche saw pain as a chisel, and a chisel doesn't sculpt on its own. It needs a hand, a direction, an intention. Left lying on the stone, a chisel does absolutely nothing. Struck without direction, it only chips and ruins. So the correct question, the one you should ask after anything difficult, was never, did this make me stronger? The question is, what did I do with this? What changed in my life because of it? What did I build, decide, abandon, or begin that was only possible because I went through it? If the answer is nothing, I just endured it, then you didn't get stronger. You only suffered. And there's no prize for that. The third truth, then, enduring isn't the same as growing. You can spend 10 years bearing something and come out exactly the same, only 10 years older and more tired. And look at how this shows up in practice, because the difference is visible from outside. Two people lose their job in the same month. The first spends 8 months reliving the injustice, telling the story to anyone who'll listen, waiting for the market to improve. The second spends those same 8 months suffering just as much, with the same fear, but learns a new skill, changes fields, or starts something they'd never have had the courage to start if they hadn't been pushed. Both suffered. Both didn't die. Only one came out different. And it wasn't because one suffered more beautifully than the other. It was because one converted and the other only endured. Fourth truth. That line became a weapon used against people who suffer. And this is where it gets ugly, because the line left the book and became an instrument of silencing. Notice how it's used in practice. Someone is going through something hard and starts talking about it. And out comes the line, almost always as a polite way of closing the subject. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Translation: stop talking about this. Treat it as a lesson. Don't make me deal with your discomfort. It became what's called toxic positivity, the demand that all pain be immediately converted into a lesson, into growth, into gratitude. Pain isn't allowed to just be pain. It has to come with a happy ending attached, or it bothers the people nearby. And the result is that people stop talking. They swallow it. They learn that complaining is weakness, that being unwell for a long time is a character flaw, and that the only acceptable way to suffer is the way where you've already come out on top. Nietzsche would hate this for a specific reason. He spent his life attacking moralities that demand people pretend. One of his lines being used to force someone to lie about their own pain is the complete inversion of everything he stood for. He wanted more honesty about suffering, not less. The fourth truth, then: when that line is used to silence someone, it stops being philosophy and becomes social anesthesia. And the worst part is that whoever uses it usually thinks they're helping. There's a simple replacement, by the way, and it costs nothing. When someone tells you they're going through something hard, you don't have to hand them a lesson. You can just say, "That sounds heavy. Tell me more." That single sentence does more than every motivational quote ever printed on a wall, because it doesn't demand that the person convert their pain into something presentable before they're allowed to speak about it. If you've heard that line at a moment when what you needed was something else, write 5 words in the comments: "I did not get stronger." Fifth truth: what kills you slowly doesn't strengthen you. It empties you every day. This is the one almost no one notices, and it's decisive. Notice that the line speaks of something that doesn't kill you. People read that as if any suffering you survive counts. But there's an entire category of suffering that neither kills nor strengthens. Chronic, low-intensity suffering that lasts for years. The job you hate but tolerate. The dead relationship that continues out of inertia. The debt that squeezes every month. The wrong city. The routine that consumes you without ever wounding you outright. None of those things kill you, and none of them strengthen you. They do something worse. They wear you down, a little every day, like a stone under running water, which doesn't shatter at once. It just gets smaller over 30 years. And here's the most perverse trap. The line gives those situations a noble justification. You look at what's consuming you and think, "This is making me stronger. This is toughening me up." It isn't. It's only consuming you. And the line gave you permission to stay. The fifth truth, then: there's a suffering that forges and a suffering that corrodes. Confusing the two is the most expensive mistake a person can make, because it costs years. And there's a simple way to tell them apart, worth more than the rest of this video. The suffering that forges has a direction. It comes from something you chose to carry, a training, a difficult work, a conversation that needed to happen, a road you decided to walk knowing it would hurt. It has a beginning, a purpose, and an expected end. The suffering that corrodes has no direction at all. It just happens to you indefinitely, and you chose nothing. It has no expected end because there's no project behind it. So the question is, did I choose to carry this for the sake of something, or has this simply been happening to me for far too long? The answer separates the weight of training from the weight that crushes. Sixth truth. And now I turn the mirror. You use that line to avoid changing anything. If you got this far thinking about the people who said that line to you, stop. Because now it's about what you say to yourself. Think of something in your life that's been hurting you for a long time. You know what it is. And think about how you talk about it inside your own head. It's probably something like, "It's hard, but this is making me stronger. I'm learning from this. One day I'll look back and be grateful." Now notice what those phrases do. They don't give you strength. They give you permission. Permission to do nothing. Because if it's making you stronger, then nothing needs to change. You just keep enduring, and the benefit arrives on its own. That's the real function of that line in your life. It turns inertia into virtue. It makes your passivity look like heroic resistance. And while you tell yourself that story, the months go by. The test is simple and uncomfortable. Take that situation and ask, with brutal honesty, whether you're growing through it or merely surviving it. If you can't point to a single concrete thing that changed in you because of it, you're not being strengthened. You're being worn down with a motivational soundtrack. The sixth truth, then. The line most used to justify suffering is often the most elegant excuse for not leaving it. It isn't strength. It's anesthesia with a courageous name. Seventh truth. And now everything turns over. After 6 truths, you might be thinking, so the line is garbage, throw it out. That's not it. The line is true, but only once you understand what it actually demands. And what Nietzsche really proposes is far bigger than the line. First, the correction. Suffering isn't good, and Nietzsche never said it was. What he says is different. Suffering is unavoidable. It comes, with or without your permission. And since it comes either way, there are only 2 possible postures toward it. You can spend your life contorting yourself to avoid it, shrinking, always choosing the safest road so as not to feel pain. Or you can accept that it's part of the price of a large life, and stop organizing your existence around escape. That's what he calls Amor, Fati, to love your own fate. It isn't enjoying suffering, and it's important to be clear about that. It's ceasing to spend energy wishing your life had been another. It's saying yes to the life you have, including the parts that hurt, because they're part of the same package that brought everything good you have. And second, the demand. If suffering is raw material, then the question isn't how much you endured, it's what you made. The strong don't collect scars as if they were medals. They convert. They take what happened and turn it into work, into a decision, into change, into something that exists in the world and wouldn't exist if that hadn't happened. And now go back to the man who wrote the line. Nietzsche didn't defeat his own suffering. He was destroyed by it. The collapse of 1889 was final, and the last 11 years of his life were silence. If the line were a promise, he'd be the greatest proof that it's false. But notice what he did while he still could. Sick, nearly blind, ignored, with pains that kept him in bed for weeks, he wrote a body of work that shakes the planet 140 years later. He wasn't strengthened by the pain. He created despite it, and with it, for as long as he had. That's the honest version of the line. Not, suffering will save you, but, suffering is coming. It owes you nothing, and the only thing in your hands is what you build before it reaches you. The seventh truth, then. Stop asking whether the pain made you stronger. Start asking what you did with it. Because the value was never in what happened to you. It's always in what you did afterward. Let's hold all 7 before the fire dies down. The first. The line isn't a promise. It's a condition. Suffering pays nothing on its own. The second. Most suffering doesn't strengthen. It just breaks. Pretending otherwise disrespects those who were broken. The third. What strengthens isn't the pain. It's what you do with it. The chisel doesn't sculpt on its own. The fourth. The line became a weapon against those who suffer, a polite way of telling someone to be quiet. The fifth. Chronic suffering doesn't forge, it corrodes, and the line gives you permission to stay in it. The sixth. You use the line to turn inertia into virtue. It isn't courage, it's anesthesia. And the seventh. Amor, Fati. Accept pain as part of the price of a large life and convert it into work. The question isn't how much you endured, it's what you made. So this week, one task, short and probably uncomfortable. Choose the situation in your life you've been telling yourself is making you stronger. You already know which one. It came into your head during the 6th truth and hasn't left. And answer a single question with brutal honesty. What exactly changed in me because of this in the last 6 months? Not what I learned in theory, what I decided, what I started, what I abandoned, what I do differently today. If you can answer with something concrete, good. Keep going, because there's a real forge there. If you can't answer anything, you've just discovered you're not being forged. You're being worn down. And then the task is the second part. Choose one action, just one, that converts it into something.
A conversation you've been postponing, a request, an exit, a beginning. Anything that turns what's happening to you into something you do. Because that's the difference between the chisel in your hand and the chisel left lying on the stone. And one serious thing, because this channel doesn't play with this. If the pain you carry isn't a difficulty of life, but something deeper, a weight that's lasted weeks, a sadness that won't lift, memories that won't let go. Or if you look inside and find something that frightens you, that isn't philosophy, and it isn't solved by a video. That calls for real help, a professional, or a person you trust. And look, that contradicts nothing I've said here. Seeking help is the exact opposite of just enduring. It's conversion into action. It's the strongest thing there is. And now tell me, which of the 7 burned you deepest? Not the prettiest one, the one that left you uncomfortable, the one you already started arguing against in your head while I was talking. And answer the other, which is the one that matters. What's the thing you've been enduring and calling growth? Write it in one sentence. Putting it into words is already the first act of conversion. If this video lit something, leave a like. That's how it finds someone who is, right now, bearing something they shouldn't be bearing and calling it strength. And subscribe, because here we don't seek comfort. We seek fire. And every week I come back with more. Become who you are. And don't wait for suffering to make you strong. It won't. Get up and do something with it.